I hope everyone is having a great conference, whether you're watching this right now or asynchronously at another time as we put this together. And I just want to thank everybody on the planning and organizing team, just really wonderful people helping out and putting this all together, and to Alex Bifari here helping me get this together. I'm grateful for that. And for the whole Institute for Integrative Health and Wellness at USC, which I'm proud to be a part of. Introduce myself. My name is Ronan Hallowell. I'm a assistant professor in the Department of Medical Education at the Keck School of Medicine here at USC. And I'm a learning and social scientist by training, and also have a background in Native American studies. My primary work is in the MD program, where I'm the co-director of a new health, justice, and systems of care longitudinal course that we're piloting this year, and will launch to all the medical students next year. Jumping into today's session, which is about ethical approaches to learning from Indigenous medicine ways. So wanted to first start with a land acknowledgement to where I live here, broadcasting from West Hollywood, and also the same land where USC is based, in the land of the Tongva people, the Gabrieno Tongva. I'm grateful to them and to live on this land called Towangar, as they call the LA Basin and the Southern Channel Islands, where they predominantly lived. And so I pay my respects to the ancestors, the elders, and our relations past, present, and emerging. So thank you. And it's mention also that I'm primarily talking about Lakota tradition, but I've learned from other traditions, but want to acknowledge that I'm not Lakota person by blood. Though I have been studying these ways for about 25 years, so I want to share with you that what I share with you today is from my level of understanding, which is limited, and want to acknowledge that I'm not speaking for Lakota people or any other Native American people. I'm speaking for myself, and to share what I've learned, in which the deepest part of that learning took place over a course of about 10 years. When I first started learning, when I was in my 20s, and had a teacher, John Goodvoice, from the Sichangu Lakota people, who he was a medicine helper and singer for the great medicine man Robert Steed, and Lakota was his first language, and I spent about 10 years studying ceremonial singing with him. Unfortunately, he's passed away, but I honor his memory. And I studied for 10 years before I started to teach or share, and I asked his permission before I started to do that. When I first started to share this as a high school teacher many years ago, I just wanted to acknowledge that, and that what I'm sharing today is how I've tried to learn in a good way. And we're going to hear from a couple of my colleagues and friends who've also engaged with that, and I hope that we could model that for folks who are not of Native background, or maybe they're part Native but didn't grow up that way, and so that they can think about how to do this in a good way. And I think the key takeaway for this, if you want one thing to remember, and it's kind of digested from one of my elders, is to learn to listen, and listen to learn, with humility and respect. And those two things, humility and respect, will take you a long way in trying to learn from these ways. I'm going to open up before we hear from my colleague, Dr. Marc Weigensberg, with a brief meditation. So I invite you to close your eyes if you like. And I'm going to ask you, we're going to orient ourselves to the 4 directions, or sometimes the 6, sometimes in Lakota we do 6 directions. So I'm going to adjust a little bit today. We're going to do 5 directions, so the 4 cardinal directions in the center. And in this meditation, I'm going to kind of talk us through a type of meditation, and we'll end that with a song, with a 4 directions vision quest song, which was a song that I learned when I undertook that ceremony under the guidance of the Lakota medicine man Godfrey Chips, with also the guidance of my teacher John Goodvoice and others. So to start this in the West, if you close your eyes and, put your attention to the West direction for you. And in this meditation, we're going to honor the names of Native people, and I'll be able to name all of the tribes and nations, but there's hundreds and hundreds. There's over 500 recognized tribes, and there's in the United States alone, and there's 100 more that have not been recognized. And so we just acknowledge, and I'm going to say some of those names and recognizing that I don't know and can't include all of them. But in the West, if we think about the Tongva people who are here in Southern California and the land that I live on and where USC is based, and the Chumash who live close as well, and folks like the Mojave, and also in Arizona, the Akimel Odom, the nation that my elder teacher that I still learn from, Rod McAfee, his people, and also the a little further north in the Bay Area, the Miwok and Ohlone and the Pomo, and also, in the more kind of Southwest, the Apache and Comanche and others. And if we go even further west across the ocean, the Indigenous Hawaiian people who have also been gracious and taught me over the years. We put our attention to the West and are grateful to those ancestors and those that are living now, and those descendants that are to come. And as we turn our attention to the North and think about the mountains and the cold winters, and some of the people living in the North, the Yakima and the Haida and the Duwamish from the Washington state area, and the Tlingit and Inuit and Cree. You think of some of the great peoples up there and their beautiful, some of their traditions of potlatch, which is a generous giving away ceremony. And we're grateful for the beautiful art and all of the things that they've contributed and their ways of knowing, and their relationship with the earth over many thousands of years. And as we turn our attention in your mind's eye to the East, we think of people like the Huron and the Onondaga and Seneca and Mohawk and other members of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Lenape and others, and think of great contributions they've made to our Constitution and to the food that we eat. And think of folks like the Wampanoag who first came into contact 400 plus years ago, and we ponder and think about their ancestors and those that are living today, and their descendants to come, and recognize that they're here, and although sometimes have struggles, they're also thriving and living and reconnecting with their ways. And we hope that they can continue to have the strength to do that. And now we turn our attention to the South and think of many of the great tribes of the Southeast, like the Cherokee and the Natchez and Choctaw and the Creek and the Seminole and the Chickasaw. And as we go further down into Mexico and Central and South America, and think of beautiful people like the Mixtec and the Triqui, the Mayans and Guarani and Sequoia, and the Shipibo people who've shared beautiful medicine songs and plant medicine ways with me in Peru. And we think of the peoples, and again, so much of the amazing foods, 70% of modern food, somewhere around that, have come from this beautiful land. And so we're grateful for that. And so I offer this Four Directions song as an honoring of those ancestors and those living now and those descendants who will come. And so ask to put your attention. I'll start in the West. You'll hear the song repeat, and just sit with what you feel is sacred in those directions for you. The song goes like this. Ateuyoch beatana wajielo huamayankayo iteu toteyo nawajielo hayo hai atewazeyatana wajielo Uamayankayo. Iteutateya nawajielo. Hai yo yo hai. Ateu heyam patana wajielo. Uamayankayo. Iteutateya nawajielo. Hai yo yo hai. Ateito hagatana wajielo. Uamayankayo. Iteutateya nawajielo. Hai yo yo hai. How hechitu mitakuyasan. So it is, all my relations. So it's now that we've entered this space with each other, a virtual sacred space, I'm going to let my colleague, Dr. Marc Weigensberg, one of the founders of the Institute for Integrative Health and Wellness, talk to you a little bit about his experience learning from Lakota ways. He is now our director emeritus, and he is also a physician, and we'll talk to you a little bit about his experience. If you have questions, please put them in the question and answer section, and we'll get to those at the end of the session. So I will share my screen, and we'll hear from Dr. Weigensberg just one sec.
Everybody, my name is Marc Weigensberg. I'm a physician at LA County USC Medical Center, pediatric endocrinologist, and former director of the Institute for Integrative Health and Wellness. So it's an honor to be here. Thank you, Ronan, for inviting me to share in this workshop. Ronan asked me to speak a little bit about my path, my spiritual path on the road of indigenous ways, if you would. And so I'll have to take you back more than 25 years, early 1990s. And I was going through kind of a rough time at that point in my life. And I found myself, for reasons I could not understand, being called to the Southwest Museum, which is, at the time, was that place where all of the Native American materials and exhibits and all that were held. And I can't tell you how I found out about the Southwest Museum, but it was like a magnet drawing me there. And it felt like a very sacred space to walk into there and to learn. I started reading everything I could about Native American path, spiritual path, history, what really happened in the United States, what is the history that we don't learn in the school books, mostly as white kids growing up. Black Elk Speaks, I Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, other books. I got really interested in all the arts and symbols and really the mindset of an earth-based spirituality. What does it really mean to have the mind of an indigenous human, two-legged? And that's a question I've been trying to answer and trying to get to for over 25 years, and gained a lot of respect for the traditions and the ways of people who are really connected to the earth in a way that most of us modern Westerners are not. I think it's been an evolving awareness that I've had over time. Major concepts such as seeing time as circles and cycles, not as linear and always progressing, always to some goal, but rather we're in fact in circles of time, living things in cycles over and over. I like to think that each cycle we learn a little bit more and gain experience and wisdom from it. The other thing I'd like to say is at this point is that learning Native American indigenous ways didn't change who I was from the standpoint of my birth lineage. It only added to it. So you don't have to give up who you are. you just start to gain a newer appreciation and perspective, a different appreciation perspective of your life and where it fits within the circle of all things. So in fact, the Native tradition turned me very directly towards understanding more of my own uh, position from my birth lineage of a Hebrew, from the Hebrew people or Jewish people, if you would. I remember many times being told on my path by Native elders, you have to learn the indigenous history of your own people. It's not that you take on some other people's ideas, but for me, really, the traveling on in the ways of Native teachings really turned me back to my own people's indigenous history, so that I really have come to understand over the 25 years the indigenous ways and healing ways of my own people as well. I want to speak a little bit about some of my experience with Native ceremony. I found myself starting in the mid 90s being invited to sweat lodge ceremonies around LA and other places, and always led by elders within the tradition and teachers. And as a healer myself, I could see how the Inipi ceremony, as Lakota word for it, the sweat lodge ceremony, could really lead to a healing of the whole person, body, mind, spirit. And I remember very clearly being schooled by one of the leaders of the lodges when I first started there. And I kind of asked him, well, what does one do here? And he says, just sit quietly, look, observe, listen. Don't do anything you don't see an elder already doing. And that was really good advice, because I think as Westerners, we tend to barge in and start getting our ideas going, what we got to do, da, 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 da. But when you're on this path, you really start to learn about humility. You learn about the importance of relationships. So for instance, if there's an elder with you, you don't interrupt, you don't speak. And it's not a question of rigidity or anything. It's just a question of that's what you do. You learn how to live in community, and you learn how to live by those relationships. So, so that's been really a profound part of my experience, for the last couple of decades, is being part of lodge ceremonies, assisting in lodge ceremonies. And in fact, it really led me to start thinking about, is this something that I'm supposed to learn myself to lead? And I approached that question very cautiously and with great respect and humility. And I did ask one of my teachers, elders, about that. And he turned to me and said, well, if that's a question that's coming through you now, then you have to fast. Which led to 4 years of fasting out in nature and exploring that issue, among other issues, and really learning to be connected to earth and to spirit through those sacred ways and those sacred ceremonies. I think the other topic I wanted to talk about a bit is how understanding something about Native tradition and Native healing traditions has impacted me as a Western trained physician. And it's hard to say enough or specify, except to say that it really taught me a much more holistic way of looking at what healing means. So a much broader perspective on that. I think the Western allopathic tradition is in fact fairly limiting. And although it sees itself as the modern way and the civilized way of doing medicine, I would say that in many ways, many of the things that it leaves out are very significant healing ways of relationship and being in relationship and being in community. These are healing ways. I mean, I remember when HIPAA first came about, all this stuff about privacy this, privacy that. And what I know from indigenous healing is that you need a community to heal. You don't heal most of the times by being separated off from everybody in this private little world, but that you really need community heals and is healing. I remember reading early in my ways on this path, a book by a Native elder And he described a healing ceremony he did in a hospital with a little boy who was sick, closing off the room, making it completely dark, inviting the spirits. And I remember, this was early in my journeys on this path. I remember thinking to myself, wow, that's incredible. And I really believe that happened. And that was a turning point for me, because then it became not just about folklore or legend or anything like that, but it became a real way of living and a real way, something real that I wanted to introduce into my life. So I think, as I said, at this point, I've been a Western trained physician. I've done research that's been funded by the National Institutes of Health. So I understand Western science. And I understand the great contributions it can and has made. And I also understand its limitations. And I also understand that there's a science in a way to what comes through indigenous traditions. This has been captured particularly in several books, one called Native Science and one called Blackfoot Physics, which was written by a theoretical physicist and who really talks about the type of science and teachings that are within Native traditions. So I think having walked this path has helped me become a better physician, practice better, understanding that the key to healing my patients is my relationship with the patients, that the medicine that we use, Western medicine, is part of it, but not the whole thing, and that the relationship with my patients is bi-directional. So I learn from them and am healed by them as much as I am able to give to them and hopefully participate in their healing. So, and I think there's many, many other things probably that are moving within me that I can't even verbalize or articulate with respect to ways that the Native path has broadened and enriched my experience as a physician and a healer. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you for the time. It was a pleasure to be able to speak to you all. I hope there was some useful and interesting information that I share. Bye-bye.
Great. Well, I hope you appreciated those insights from Dr. Weigensberg. He has a great combination of experiences, I think, really relevant to this conference and the whole perspective of integrative medicine. And so I'm grateful that he was willing to share with us. I'm going to share now a dialogue with a friend of mine. Dr. Regensburg talked a lot the primacy of relationship in healing and also just in spirituality and just culture in general in the Lakota way. And from other experiences, that this is very important in other indigenous ways. And just give you in this dialogue with my friend Rene, who is part, he'll tell you a little bit about it, part Tohono O'odham from Arizona. And we've met along the medicine path, first in Peru, when we had an opportunity to do ceremonies with the Shipibo people, but also have a connection here with Lakota. And so he's going to share, we're going to dialogue a little bit, and then it's about 20 minutes, and then we should, if there's some questions, we can take that. And if not, we'll end with a brief thank you song. So let me share that dialogue with you. And again, feel free to put any questions in the chat. All right, well, I'm grateful to be joined this evening with my good friend Rene Roman, and he agreed to talk to me, dialogue a little bit with me about his experiences being introduced to indigenous ways of healing in some different ways, and talking a little bit about his ancestry and how sort of through the vagaries of life has come to learn from a couple different ways, and then talk just a little bit about how we've become friends and explored singing sacred Lakota songs together from a kind of bigger picture kind of healing medicine perspective based in making relations and respectfully learning from these traditions that we each had an opportunity to be exposed to. So, one of the teachings that I've learned from my elders in approaching to ethically learn from these ways, especially since myself, I'm not, from the Lakota way or from a specific indigenous tradition, that, regardless of all of that, just there's a need to kind of, be clear, explore your own ancestry and who you are, and then try to, work on building good relationships, ethical, positive relationships in the web of life here. And so, I'll speak to the group a little more during the day of the conference and introduce myself. But for right now, Rene, would you mind, just talking a little bit about your background, your family, and maybe look a little bit like how we met each other and have been building this mutually supportive relationship with each other around the songs and some different medicine ways.
Absolutely. Ahome takuyasin.
Oh.
I think I can do this. There's not very many people here now, so I can take my mask off. So I guess we'll start with my family background. The native side comes from my grandmother. Her name is Aurora, or in Spanish it's Aurora Reyes. She was born in Tucson, Arizona. She is the Native American blood side of the family. Her tribe is Tohono O'odham, which is a little bit south of Phoenix, actually more south of Phoenix, into Mexico. My father's mother is also indigenous Mexican, but I'm not quite sure the percentage so much there, but definitely my grandmother on my mother's side, she's the Tohono O'odham. So that was growing up, I was always told, Tohono O'odham this and Tohono O'odham that for my grandmother, but we never really took her seriously until she passed away. And I think that's when she probably was speaking, I think, to me on from the other side to really engage in medicine ways. I didn't really take it to heart, let's say, until 2012. I was introduced to Sweat Lodge from a friend who I was learning some native traditions, and she invited me to Sweat Lodge, and I went, and that's where I met Miguel, and that was pretty much how things started in medicine ways. Sweat Lodge really was a game changer, and that's where I learned to sing Lakota in the Sweat Lodge. And then I want to say around 2015 was when I felt the need to go to Peru and explore with ayahuasca. And I did that for 2 years. And in 2018, there you go. In 2018 is when I met Ronan. And it was a really interesting experience because after, I think it might have been our second ceremony, Ronan started singing. And the interesting thing about that was he was to the left of me, and I think I might have had maybe a 5-word discussion with you previous to that. And you started to sing, and the first thing I remember saying to myself was, I know that song. But it was a very interesting kinship that birthed that night, I think, and got back to the States, and we kept in touch. And at that point, when COVID hit, I just had the idea that it would be a nice idea if Ronan taught some folks some Lakota songs, and that's how we started. We came together and was at March, April, I think, of this year, and I think that was a very huge impact on my life because I didn't think I had it in me, so to speak, and I find myself singing songs even when I least expect it. When I'm in the supermarket, I just hear the songs come through, and I'm humming, and then I start to hear myself verbalizing the words, and the next thing you know, I'm singing a song, and then I'm in line, and people say, "What was that? What were you singing?" And I never thought that would ever happen, but it's happened, and so that's why I think I talked to Ronan a little bit after class, I think back in maybe August, and I said, do you have any more songs? And so that's I think a really quick history, I think, of how I came to Medicine Ways.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I know you've also had the chance recently to be out in nature and sing the songs in nature in that way, really connecting with the earth and spirit.
Absolutely.
Has been awesome. And yeah, so I remember as well a couple of years ago when we met in a ceremonial space, that kind of our relationship was launched in that, way of we were learning from Shipibo folks in Peru in a good way, and they were in this intercultural exchange that we had with them, the folks down there.
Yes.
They were open to letting me sing.
Yes.
After their ceremony closed, which I was really honored to do, and it really did just feel that since we were in a ceremonial space and with the folks that we were there with, and with their tradition being so singing, the Shipibo tradition being so singing oriented, their medicine being where they sing throughout the whole ceremony, and they sing special healing songs for individually, and so it seemed to kind of fit, and so we made that connection in that way of I think for both of us looking, having some previous involvement in the kind of life's journey of trying to come to wholeness and healing different things from our past, healing things with our parents and illnesses in the family and things like that, and so much of that finding that sense of medicine in Indigenous ways is that in ways that I've learned about or been able to see connections, is trying to find that wholeness and that place of relationship with others, with the earth, with the plants and the animals, and connecting with the those things that sometimes in our modern world we seem to get so disconnected from. And it's also was interesting that our the Sweat Lodge, Miguel Rivera, your Sweat Lodge teacher, I don't know real well, but I did have a connection with as well. Mutual friends, and so it was nice to know that we also we had a circle of folks that we had a connection with, and
small world.
I think one of the things is that it's this kind of lifelong ongoing kind of process of kind of discovery, and a combination of working on your own sort of internal thing, and then also recognizing that we're working with stuff from other cultures, and recognizing the limit. I recognize the limits of my own knowledge of those things, but studied for many years with a first language elder who I asked permission to, and yet I recognize there's still just a teeny bit that I know, but had found that it is something to be shared in the context of still kind of always asking yourself, is this the right place, or is this the right person? And I felt with you that since we were introduced in this good way in this ceremony space, it really resonated. And I could see for you when we started doing some of the songs, well, first, I know we did have, before COVID, about a year ago, we did have that chance to sweat together.
Right.
Which was really
December.
nice. Unfortunately, we're not able to do that at this right now. But then that when I taught for the few folks online who already had some connection, and I felt were respectful and with the right people to share with. That was a really powerful time, and that
absolutely.
And I could tell for you there was a piece of growth that you kind of went to another, incorporated into practice for yourself. And
Yes.
I don't know, maybe could you talk just a little bit more about sort of like how the singing and
Yes.
connecting with that is like helping you in your self exploration, your connection with your roots, and
Oh, absolutely.
your path.
The beautiful thing that happened after, I think when we were really in the middle of COVID, that was, I think, somewhere around about May-ish, June-ish, is when I started to travel. And my first location was, or destination was New Mexico. But on my way back, my friend said, you should probably stop in Sedona. And I was only going to stay for 2 days, but I ended up staying for a week and a half, just because the energy pulled me in. And I was very close to my ancestral land. And so I decided to hike. And I was alone. I was just felt like I needed to just hike and be with the land and go to these vortex sites that everybody talks about and that kind of thing. And every hike that I went in Sedona, I found myself singing. And every time I went to 3 sites, and there was a peak for each location. And I found myself at each hiking location, when I got to the top of that hill or the top of the mountain, Bell Rock was one of them, I found myself singing for at least an hour. And there was just something, I want to use the word magic, but there was something very magical about that experience, because did I have songs that I had sung in Sweat Lodge? Yes. But when we were interacting with your class, I just felt like there was just a deeper connection, I think, with the songs that I'd learned from you. And what I really enjoyed, that there was just a bunch more confidence that I had. But I also think it was ancestrally, I think they were poking me to really explore those songs. And so I found myself singing throughout that whole week in Sedona. I got back to LA. I wasn't in LA more than a week when I decided I was going to go to Mount Shasta. And I went 4 times in the 3 months, basically all summer. I went 4 times, and I spent about 2 to 3 weeks each time. And in every hike or in every lake I swam, I was singing. And that was, again, I didn't expect that. It was just a switch turned on. And I wasn't going into a particular hike saying, I'm going to sing when I get there. I found myself at Mount Shasta. I was at the foot of the mountain. I took about, I don't remember how far it was, but it could have been maybe a 45-minute hike up the mountain. And I stopped and I sat, and they just want to come out. The songs just want to come out. And that experience, it was very soul feeding. I didn't think that was going to happen. So on the one hand, I kind of feel like we were meant to meet in the jungle, and it was we were really, there was some kind of connection that happened that allowed me to go into these sacred sites and sing. And when I would sing, I would have this feeling that ancestrally there was an appreciation, I think, that those particular songs, I know that Mount Shasta is a very sacred land, as well as Sedona. And so I don't know, I felt that these songs needed to be sang in that part of the land for nothing else, just to have reverence and recognize that these songs needed to be sung in those locations. Who would have thought I was going to do it, though? But it came through, and it was a wonderful experience.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, I know that you work in the healing arts as a massage therapist and cranial sacral therapist, and you're studying other somatic experiencing and other modalities. Can you talk? Is there any connection between sort of the energy or what you're working with and learning about yourself through connecting to indigenous ways, the land, your own ancestry, the singing, that any ways kind of moving in your healing arts work?
Ooh, that's a big question. Absolutely. I think it's the thing that comes to mind is the red road. And walking the red road is a very sacred road to walk. And when I go into a session, cranial sacral or a massage session, I bring in my guides with me to guide me. The first thing I always ask for is to be a hollow bone and to allow the medicine to come through me. And I would say that that's opened up much more in the last year. I would say that it started when we were in Peru back in 2015, and it continued on. As I cleared more came through. As we spent some time singing, I think vibrationally, I want to say I moved up a little bit, I feel. Intuitively, I think things opened up much more. And so I would say that just with the work that we've done and the work that I've done in the jungles of Peru, work with you, and the schooling that I've been involved with, I just feel like if I was, if how could I put it? I think it would be the valve opened up a hell of a lot more than it ever did back in 2015, and I would say that Medicine Ways has opened up so much more potential than I ever even thought. But the key, I think, is to be a hollow bone. That's what I have learned through Sweat Lodge and in Medicine Ways, is that it's not necessary. It's not me. It's what's coming through me.
Yeah, and so it's that humility for those that aren't
absolutely
with that term. It's a term used in Lakota, and it's like
yes.
blowing on an eagle bone whistle in the sun dance, or that sense that you become this. You're humble.
Yes.
You don't. It's not your ego.
No.
I'm great at all of this. It's that deep
No.
humility, and that you're asking for the energy to move through you. I appreciate the way you say that. And I noticed that you've worked on me
yes.
body work before, and I definitely picked it. You were sensitive, and I could tell yes. Working with those things, and so it's great to see that connection between your own personal growth and then in working to help other people to try to work on the thing, help them to be healthier and feel better and less pain and be more human and more vibrant. And
yes.
I think that's really awesome.
I think you hit it. Humility. I think that was something very hard for me, I would say in 2012, because I had, a little bit of background. I used to be a pastry chef for about 14, 15 years. And that's a career that's a little bit about ego, right? And there's a lot of me in that I shouldn't say in the career, but you really have to, it's about what I bring to the table and my talents and my artistry. And I found that in healing arts, it's really about being humble. And so that was a really, I don't want to say difficult transition, but I really had to focus on transitioning from that part of my life into the healing arts. And the healing arts, the first thing I remember when I went into Peru was, you need to let your ego go. And that took about 4 ceremonies. But once it happened, it was really clear. I had a lot of ego in my life, and Medicine Ways really helped to help me to recognize that it's to let go of the ego. You're not going to do anything without, if you stick to it. If you hold on to your ego, then this part of your life isn't going to open up. So that was a major gift. And I think when you and I went to the desert in Arizona last year, that was one of the prayers that I had for myself, was to really understand what humility is. And that was definitely a beautiful ceremony that day.
I think that's a great way to bring this to a close, and to kind of when we're working to learn from Indigenous medicine ways, and wherever we come from, whatever background, whoever you are, whenever, all through the whole process, is walking in that humble way. That's probably the number one lesson, and things will open up, and you'll be able to help people, and you learn how to do it in a good way. And you'll learn that if you make a mistake, you'll learn from it, you'll make amends. But the more and more you come from that humble way, you'll be guided to do things so that you're not appropriating someone's tradition, or you're doing something disrespectful,
Absolutely.
you'll learn, if you're humble and you need to be redirected, you'll be open to learning from the elders or doing things.
Oh,
But
yes.
I do think in these times we need to connect with these things, and that's why,
Yes.
I share this, and I appreciate that you encourage me to share. Sometimes I'm a little bit reluctant,
Yes.
but building these relationships, it's awesome, and it's been great to see you grow and
Thank you.
learn. And it's what you shared was awesome, and I think we should maybe wrap up here. But all right, great. That was the main stuff I wanted to cover, and I do see there is a question, so I want to address that. And if there's any others, feel free to put them in the Q&A. And Alex, I can see them in the Q&A right now since they came through, so that's helpful. And then we're just got a couple minutes left. There's about a 2-minute thank you song if we have enough time. So the question is, where do you recommend someone start their journey? Do you have other books that facilitate your learning? I think a good way to start your journey is to start from where you're at. And I mean that in a way of like wherever you're living right now. Read some history about the people that live or have lived in that area. There's a lot of different ways. I don't think I can, prescribe one way, but I'd say, and a suggestion is, first, to start, we talk about making an offering. In Lakota, we offer tobacco. So purchase some tobacco and maybe give a prayer or meditation and offer that tobacco to the ground or to a tree, and ask that you want to learn about these ways, and you recognize that you live wherever you are living, wherever that is, that you want to learn about that, and then look up a book like that. Also possibly looking, powwows happen all over. Those are more social events. And that's also a good starting place. So those are a couple of things. I think there's probably a way you can find me through the USC website and whatnot if you wanted more specifics. I'd be happy to send me an email. It's not too hard. You can Google me. It's not too hard to find. Another question, is it possible to go somewhere and have a family sweat lodge experience? Or is that experience more sacred and has to be earned? I would say, in a way, it's possible, but all of these things, there are steps to take. And so the first thing, is to start small, start with your own inner work. And those things like an offering, let's say if you're out on a hike, a very simple way to give an offering is to pluck a piece of your hair. And if you don't have something else, and make an offering that way. And so it started out as an internal piece, and about your relationship with the earth, and think about your indigenous roots. At some point, we all have some indigenous part of ourselves. I don't say that in a way of trying to be some other type of native person, but we're human beings. We all live on the earth. We are indigenous to the earth. So start with that and put that out there. And when you walk on this road, when the time comes, you'll find something about a sweat lodge ceremony. But I'd say take it slower and be careful about it, and take some time to learn about who it is. Don't just run into it. And when the time is right, there are sweat lodges around the country, and take it step by step in a humble way. Start with that internal work yourself, and it'll come to you. And then are there Native American centers that encourage visitors and would provide education? There are Native American centers around. I know there's one in Oakland, California called Friendship House, and I'm not super connected in that domain right at the moment, just because I kind of have my own circles. But there are. I also would say like universities. Not all universities have things, but look for Native American Studies programs. UCLA has it. There's ones around the country. That would also be a good way to find out information about that. So I know that we're at time here, so I really appreciate everybody joining us, and say in Lakota Pilamaye, thank you. Wopila, big thank you to all of you for joining, and for Lakota people for teaching me, and other Native people. And I hope for a Wokie Nawi Chosani for all of us, for help and health for all of humanity in these challenging times. Hechatumi Takiyasen. So it is, all my relations.